over to you.
Okay. My name's Alex Mobaraki, and I'm going to do a presentation on compressors. So what is a compressor? Dictionary says that it's an instrument or a device for compressing something, a machine used to supply air or gas at increased pressure throughout a gas turbine. But what we want to look at is an electrical device which reduces the dynamic range of a sound signal. So originally, the dynamic range control was effected through careful gain riding. It was done for classical broadcasts, where the operator was as skilled as, say, the musicians of the day. They'd read the score, notice dynamic changes, and they'd just change it accordingly. When processing electronic audio signals, pre-emphasis refers to a system process designed to increase the magnitude of a band of frequencies, which are usually higher, with respect to the magnitude of other frequencies, usually lower, in order to improve the overall signal-to-noise ratio. This is in radio. This is achieved by minimizing the adverse effects of such phenomena such as attenuation distortion or the saturation of recording media in subsequent parts of the system. European countries use 75 microseconds pre-emphasis for their FM and television sound transmission, which produced a 17 dB increase at 15 kHz and severe overmodulation if its effects were not controlled. The Fairchild Konak 602 was an instantaneous limiter that divided the audio into two bands with a 1 kHz crossover and applied pre-emphasis, clipping, and high-pass filtering to the upper band. The high-pass filter reduced the difference frequency into modulation caused by the clipper, yielding reasonably acceptable sound. It boasted the ability to eliminate problems of overload from loud cymbals, muted trumpets, bells, and the ever-present sibilant singers without quality degradation. This is the back of it, and in the 1960s, the stereo model cost $495 and mono $330. Besides the ability to improve audio, compressors were also used to strengthen the broadcasting signal. By compressing the program material at the transmitter, their broadcast range could be increased. They could reach more listeners in the fringe areas and hence could charge more to their advertisers, which was one of the main benefits of it. And that was by Walter Sear. Okay, so there are two types of compression. You've got downward compression, which is essentially your peak compression, which reduces loud sounds over a certain threshold while quiet sounds remain unaffected. And then you've got upward compression, which increases the loudness, so that's like the RMS setting in your compressor. Features of a compressor. I'm going to see threshold here. Okay, set in dB. A compressor generally reduces the level of an audio signal if its amplitude exceeds a certain threshold that can be chosen by the user. The next one is ratio. The amount of gain reduction, or how hard the compressor works, is determined by the ratio. As you can see on the right-hand side, you've got the 1, 1, 2, 1, 4, 1, and 1. Those are your ratios. The first number in the ratio refers to the input signal, and the second number refers to output. So, for example, on 4 to 1, for every 4 dBs that goes over the threshold that's chosen by the user, only 1 comes out. Makeup gain is the process of compensating for the amount of compression applied. Attack. It's measured in milliseconds. So you can have a fast attack and a slow attack ranging from 0 to, it can be more or less, but 200 on the logic compressor. It determines how fast the compressor applies the compression when the signal gets over the threshold. If, for example, you want a punchy kick, you'd have the attack set to a slow. The attack, you should have it set to slow. That way, the initial hit of the beater comes in before the compressor gets to work, and then it compresses the rest of the signal, so you've got the punch. Some compressors provide auto attack. Release. Measured in milliseconds again. It's 5 milliseconds is fast, 5,000 milliseconds is slow. This is just logic that I'm looking at right now. It determines how fast the compressor stops applying the compression. Some compressors also provide an auto release. Compression generally is quite a rhythmical element to tracks. So, for example, on a snare, you generally want to set the release very high and then bring it down until you saw the gain reduction meter just flash, because you need it to breathe. Otherwise you'll have the whole signal will be compressed all the time, and it doesn't have any life to it. So you want to make sure that you get release right. Knees. A compressor might offer a new control. It's not always necessary, but they might do. They're described as soft or hard. Generally, what happens is a hard knee is compression that is applied straight after the threshold, whereas the soft knee, it generally gives you, just before the threshold comes in, a gradual rise of ratio, just so it softens off and it's less abrupt. It's less obvious that it's being compressed. It's more subtle. Now going on to serial compression, achieved by using two fairly different compressors in a signal chain. One compressor will generally stabilize the dynamic range, while the other will more aggressively compress stronger peaks. Again, looking in the bottom right-hand corner, you will recognize that, the peak, the RMS. It has it on that where you can choose one or the other, but if you were to have two in a row and have one on the peak and one on the RMS, that's essentially serial compression. Parallel compression, otherwise known as the New York drum compression. It's rather than using a compressor unit in the traditional sense as an insert, you use the compressor as a send effect, so that the compressed and uncompressed dry signals are running parallel to each other. This beefs up everything. You've still got the original character of the uncompressed signal, but then you've also got a really punchy one to go with it. Producers such as Michael Burrow, I don't know how to pronounce his name, takes this technique to another level. He uses 5 different types of compressors running parallel to each other, so you can essentially mix in different parts of it. Yeah, if you use 5, this is a quote from Cubase. If you use 5 different models of compressor, each will be virtue of its compression character and processing side effect. After the timbre of the vocal, mixing these compressors together therefore gives you access to a range of tonal enhancements that can be matched to what the specific vocal needs. Advanced vocal compression. Okay, now you've got side chaining. The compressor uses the volume level of an alternative input signal as a trigger to determine how strongly the compressor will reduce the gain on the user's chosen output signal. Often used to create rhythmical pumping of the sound, and I've got a track lined up. Okay, so we've got just, is it showing my mouse? Yeah, cool. On the top one, you can see that I've just put in some kicks using Ultrabeat. On the second one, I've just got a, let's say that. Shame about the speakers, but just something going over the top, and then you've got, yeah, the kick. But over here, what I've done is I've sent the send from the kick to an auxiliary, and whilst that's happening, on my dark like the lead kind of long thing that was going on, I've got a compressor, and it's sidechained to bus 1, which has got a pretty low threshold, so all the signal comes in, a reasonable ratio, so you can hear it being compressed, attack, release, gain. So if we play both of those together, we should get something hopefully sounds like what I want it to sound like. You can hear the wave kind of pulsating a little bit, and that's basically sidechain compression. So now let's get back on it. Okay. Multi-band compression. Multi-band compressors work by splitting the audio signal through a number of band pass filters or crossover filters, which can be adjusted, which are yeah, the bands are here. You've got the low, low mid, high mid, and high and the crossover filters. These parts represented here, which can be adjusted by moving, so you can focus in on a more specific band. Yeah, each split signal then passes through its own compressor, and it's independently adjustable for threshold, ratio, and attack and release, which are got threshold setting here, which can be adjusted up and down to choose how much you're. Essentially the same process of what the compressor is working on, what I've spoken about previously. The signals are then recombined, and an additional limiting circuit may be employed to ensure that the combined effects do not create unwanted splits. Okay, compression progression. We all know about the war on compression, which, yeah, I don't know, you can have your own thoughts on that. I've got a clip here that briefly describes what I'm talking about how radio feels the need to increase compression to make it sound louder and more preferable to the audience. If something's loud, they're going to want to hear it. So over time, producers mastering engineers have had to increase their use of compression.
This is how the so-called loudness war is damaging the sound quality of the CDs. First, I'll play an example of a track from 1989. Notice the clarity and punch of the drums. Since the two drum hits are already maximum volume, if we want the track louder on the recording, we have to take the quieter bits and turn them up. If this track had been released in 2006, someone would probably have insisted that it be this loud. Now it sounds much louder, and in the short term, louder can seem better. But you own the volume knob, not the record producer. So you adjust your volume to find your preferred level. Here we have the same volume as the original. Unfortunately, the loudness treatment permanently changes the sound. Do you notice what's missing? The red sections mark where the punch and clarity would have been. Let's hear what that maximized track sounds like in regular listen mode. Windy, loud sound. All the punch of the drums is gone, along with much of the feel of the music that comes from some parts being louder than others. When there's no quiet, there can be no loud. The original makes you turn up your volume, and when you do, it sounds great.
So yeah, that is it.